Mortal Kombat 1 has recently had its gameplay revealed in a trailer, as well as an invite-only press event that I think might have revealed a lot more about the game than you might have assumed at first watch. While I'm pretty ecstatic about the extremely retro UI and Sub-Zero's new Ice Flail, you're all here to learn about everything about the updated combat system, rebooted characters, and most of all, the Kameo fighters. So let's take a deep dive into everything we know about Mortal Kombat 1. First off, let's look at the updated characters. The new designs are cool, sure, but I'm more here to talk mechanics. Luckily, those are cool too. While Scorpion, Katana, Johnny Cage and Raiden all have changes that are more aligned with the tag system, which I'll go into depth with soon, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Smoke, Rain and Kenshi have some more vast and immediate changes which I want to discuss first. Sub-Zero has been notoriously difficult for NRS to balance across MK history. In an attempt to prevent the shenanigans that his slide and ice clone used to cause, MK11 tried to make his thing using an axe made of ice, with very mixed results. Similarly, there was an attempt to give Raiden tools to compete competitively. He was given a long staff for pokes that again had very mixed results. I say all this because Sub-Zero's new thing is somewhat inspired by the Mortal Kombat movie, Weaponcraft. All throughout combat, Sub-Zero crafts flails, axes, spears, etc. And while we haven't seen the full extent of this, it makes Sub-Zero a lot happier to play the mid-range and play a bit more straightforwardly and honestly than just hiding behind Ice Clone permanently and his Frost Mine from previous entries. And now he can play it a lot more up in your face. And this is actually surprisingly similar to what they changed about Liu Kang too. As the new God of Fire, Liu Kang crafts dragons alongside his attacks that have very interruptible startup, but once they've spawned, travel extremely quickly and allow for surprisingly fast conversions into good damage. By the final version of MK11, Liu Kang was known for being an amazing all-rounder. His low fireball was so easy to just throw out and it was difficult to respond to. His conversions were fantastic from almost any stray hit that he managed to find while he was fishing for them, and he had great damage in unbreakable combos thanks to his EX bicycle kick. While seemingly a lot of that now remains, he's a lot more risk built into his kit, in exchange for added variety. Now that they've deleted the variation system entirely and characters just always have all of their moves, his fireball can still be used alongside or in exchange for his dragon launch, and he's gained a new, unsafe but armoured dragon overhead. And even though he can still convert into combos from long range, this now resets to a situation where Liu Kang must hard dedicate to something further in order to continue pressure after a knockdown, unless you're in the corner. Basically, he isn't just going to dominate every exchange from any range and screen position anymore, but he has a lot more toys to play with, and I think in turn he'll be a lot more fun to play both as and against in MK1. Likewise, Smoke and Rain have had complete overhauls, and look nothing like their past incarnations. Smoke is built entirely around the idea of being a ninja now, using a modified kunai flip knife and smoke bomb teleports to make him a very agile rushdown character, with pressure and mix-ups that you just have to eat after knockdowns. In past games, he was a bit of an all-rounder, and played like a bit of a mix of Noob Saibot and Sub-Zero, with a few unique answers to things that were built into his back pocket. His redesign is something I'm torn on. Besides his Slurpee Mom haircut, I mean that it's really cool to bring this kind of Killer Instinct-esque rushdown pressure into Mortal Kombat. But Smoke's old kit is so cool and iconic, it feels like a bit of a betrayal of his past to throw away essentially everything that he used to be about. And that's as much as I do admittedly really love this new design mechanically, where it would seem that Ed is taking more than a few cues from his competitors for once. Speaking of, JP is a staff-wielding boss character, who, when he's finished zoning you out and keeping you full screen, likes to keep you on your toes with unseeable teleporting 50-50s, while his normals leave much to... sorry, I meant Rain. Rain is a staff-wielding boss zoning character who, when he's finished zoning you out and keeping you full screen, likes to teleport on top of you for free strike throw high-low mix. Honestly, this change in my opinion is way more respectable than what was done to Smoke. Rain has always been in the same boat as Sub-Zero, where Rain has just had ridiculously strong tools that were too broken to receive any semblance of balance in any game, and they would often just rocket him up the tier list for free. Whether this is his MK11 Pressure Wash Max playstyle, where he gets to pretend to be Fujin but where, or his MK9 wet Kenshi impression, or even just his original MK3 infinite back kicks, this guy has historically been hellish to balance, and yet the only iconic thing about him is his golden seams and his bubble float. I think he actually really suits this new do-over he's received, and while I'm sure a few Rain mains will be incredibly sore over losing their main, this redesign does a lot more to make the fantasy of this character a lot more vivid, and impress upon us a much more varied and impactful move list that's as flashy as it is infuriating, truly befitting the Prince of Edenia. This is also where we see maybe the most insane and significantly changed character, Kenshi. Kenshi is again someone NetherRealm has had a ton of difficulty balancing. A full screen telekinetic zoner is something that by nature is hard to respond to on reaction, and yet very easy to play. And so he's not exactly a zoner anymore. And I say not exactly because he hasn't entirely lost his range, but it now works very differently compared to his previous incarnations, as he's now become a stance/puppet character. A mixture of the two most complicated fighting game archetypes, but don't take this though to mean that he's impossible to play, or let it disinterest you in him if he happens to be a favourite of yours. Stance characters are all about knowing the right tool for the right job, and puppet characters are likewise all about precision with your decision making. In his default stance, Kenshi's somewhat like the Kenshi we all know and love. He has his shoulder barge, which looks insanely unsafe in this game, and isn't the armoured launching monster special from MKX, but he's still more than free to absolutely abuse Demon Drop, whether that's in neutral or mid combo. But in his new stance, his updated normals as well as his target combos really shine, and everything he does is followed up by his puppet automatically. It will walk with him and attack with him based on the buttons you press, and is seemingly much more about your spacing than about timing with the puppet's attacks, which presents some very interesting scenarios given you can either manually turn it off, or it will turn off automatically while you're being comboed, which can present equally an opportunity and a new set of difficulties for Kenshi, as resummoning it to his new position is dangerous, but it can also potentially sandwich the opponent from behind if proper advantage is taken of its reposition. Given how insane some of the other systems in this game are, as well as how much the top 1% of NRS players are absolute lap monsters, I think there's going to be some absolutely busted scenarios that players come up with using Kenshi's new stuff, and I think even at a lower level, he's going to be very fun and rewarding to play, and much less frustrating to play against than he historically has been. It was a very genius and interesting redesign in my book, plus it is just a gorgeous visual spectacle. I absolutely love the particle effects used on him, whether it's on his stand character or just his sword normals. It is all quite simply divine. Oh, and before I move on, Johnny Cage is now a pure rushdown character. No zoning to speak of, and he's all about toxicity, both mechanically and as a human being. All of his special moves are now taunt cancelable, and taunting at all builds a hype meter, which is usable when it's full to basically enter custom combo, where he can chain special move into special move and even gains a single free EX move once per combo. To empower his mix-up pressure too, on a throw tech he can spend a bar of meter to disable his opponent's ability to throw, hugely limiting what he has to deal with offensively and quickly empowering his ability to turn the tables. I know some people are going to miss throwing low force ball all day, but unfortunately them's the breaks. But now for what you really came here for and why I was limited to only talking about the new stuff for those characters. The Kameo fighter system. We've seen around 11 characters used for it. Goro, Striker, Jax, Kung Lao, Kano, Sonya, Cyrax, Sector, Frost, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero. And obviously, these characters are all retro MK characters, but the one of these that is mostly of note from this selection is Sub-Zero. Not only is Sub-Zero a main roster character, but he's also a cameo character. Previously, I'd postulated that the devs could account for this overlap by using Sub-Zero's brother, Kuai Lang, but the route that they've taken is a lot more interesting than that, because this isn't just Sub-Zero who was in MK1, 2 and 3, this is literally Sub-Zero from MK1, 2 and 3. While that overlap would be of fairly little note normally if it was just raw arcade gameplay that we've seen, we actually see multiple core scenes from the game's campaign in the trailer. One where Sub-Zero fights and introduces us to Kung Lao, and another where Kenshi fights and introduces us to Johnny Cage. In the Kenshi fight, we see Kenshi call in MK1 Sub-Zero mid-fight, confirming there's some direct tie to the original Mortal Kombat universe Sub-Zero in the story mode of this game. Ed Boon has officially stated that the MK1 through 3 appearance of these characters is pure fan service, and yet clearly these cameos actually directly appear throughout the main campaign's actual progression. We even had campaign only cameo fighters announced for certain too. The specific wording Ed used surrounding this made me think that perhaps the cameo character in general is some kind of Shang Tsung related shapeshifting character or entity that we'll learn more about down the road throughout the story, since it's seemingly implied that even though cameos are in the story, the cameo characters that we see aren't actually those characters, and merely imitate their visual design. While postulating why or how that is the case would be a pointless diversion for this video, it's useful to note that this allows a complete overlap of at the very least the original MK cast, between both the main and cameo rosters, except for maybe Goro, who appears to have a redesign as a cameo and might not be his original MK incarnation, which I think leaves it up in the air as to whether we'll actually see him on the main roster or even as a cameo character. Perhaps sadly he is one of these campaign only cameo fighters we've had announced. You can feel free to tell me in the comments if you actually think all of these cameo characters will see representation on the main roster. I personally think that Goro is the only one in doubt, and everyone else, even Striker, will likely somehow return for this game. But it's entirely possible that the rest of the cameo fighters that we've seen don't return on the main roster too, and vice versa. Characters like Raiden, Johnny Cage and Kenshi might not have cameo fighters and purely be main roster entries, but all of that remains to be seen. And now we're ready to talk actual mechanics of cameo fighters. In my previous video I went over assists in general, and that they have uses as either combo extenders or neutral assists. I previously put out the opinion that a good direction for this system would be to have multiple directional inputs per assist and multiple different purposes to each assist on top of that. Well, I'm happy to say literally all of these possibilities have been confirmed true, and more. So let's cover cameo fighters as a system, quickly as I can. First, the cameo assist is on a simple cooldown system. The cooldown is different depending on which purpose the assist is used for, but at base it uses half of the assist meter, meaning you can potentially use 2 assist functions per combo. So far we've seen 7 distinct uses for cameo fighters: neutral assist, combo extender, combo breaker, cameo fatal blows, cameo getup, cameo fatality, and seemingly grab assist. Neutral assist is a deceptively complicated system in this game, as much of the other assist functions I just listed can also be used as a neutral assist, some with less point than others. But while some of the core neutral assists we've seen have been really weak when thrown out in the open, like Sonya's anti-air, which is much better for combo extension, or Kano's knives, which would be spending half your cameo meter for a reactable, tiny amount of damage, this is rather deceptive, because lots of individual assists have multiple uses. We've had it confirmed that Sonya projectile can be feinted to bait a jump, or charged for a more powerful assist, and seemingly Jax's grab assist can be meter burned to quickly capitalise on big damage, utilising up to 2 bars of meter and your entire assist cooldown, which currently looks to be roughly 16 seconds, although this is obviously subject to change long before the game actually releases. But to go deeper into neutral assist, there are 2 confirmed kinds of neutral assist: an ambush, the main kind we've seen used, where you can continue to control your character while the assist occurs for half of your cameo meter, and the other kind is the summon, where you stand still while the cameo does its thing. While at first glance it would look like the neutral uses for assist are at surface value very simple, like making a blocked attack safe or providing mix-ups and extending your pressure, the uses for neutral assist vary a ton from cameo to cameo. We've even seen Scorpion using the first reposition cameo, where he pulls you back full screen to reset sticky situations, and make being zoned out by rain truly infuriating. And when we see players improve over time and more cameo fighters on the roster are revealed, there's going to be a ton of uses for all these characters and their assists, which I'll explain more as we go into detail on the other uses of cameos. Speaking of which, let's look at combo extensions. For combo extension purposes, we actually see a lot of different assists used, and for many different purposes. At first glance, they seem to mainly have a lot to do with the use of the new air combo system, almost all of which we've seen have options of utilising meter burn as well as an assist, and the variation between the other kinds of grounded combo extender seems extremely vast. We see really short combo extensions that might add basically nothing besides damage, or just let you combo from situations that would normally end your combo, like Kano's knife assist, but we also see extremely long ones that carry full screen and lead up to long combos, like Goro's assist. We see Kung Lao launch as an assist, and even Sonya air projectile allowing re-jump combos, which feels like an insane sentence to be saying about Mortal Kombat. And there's even more than just these. Notably, how you can follow these up and whether it's worth it or requires meter investment seemingly changes dramatically between different character and Kameo pairings. Kitana does her own meterless and tagless launch into her own air combo, which presumably could have been much extended in this game, given some of the combos we see executed by other characters solo that are as fast moving as they are long. We can't comment yet on damage scaling for these combo extension tags, and we don't have much in the way of seeing different characters both using the same assists, seeing we only got to try 3 characters and 3 cameos in the demo, so I can't comment on the balancing of all this as a system, but it truly does seem shockingly diverse the uses of different character pairings, which is perhaps most notable in the case of Kameo Grab, since we see Striker send the opponent full screen with his, while Sonya and Jax leave the opponent at a much more generic mid-screen distance, which is great and it's a huge boon to this system conceptually. Importantly, you always use tag grab if it's available and you forward throw, while your character uses their grab if you back throw. If your tag is already in play and you forward throw, you instead do a pretty odd looking shove. While the reward for this shove isn't exactly clear yet, it seems to exist to prevent extremely potent strike-throw mix-ups using assists, but I think the fact that you're almost forced to use your tag character's throw is a very big deal that could be a real game changer for MK1. There's going to be a lot of characters who have difficulty playing full screen, like Baraka, who would essentially just be putting themselves at disadvantage if they reset the opponent full screen via striker assist, which would lose the advantage they gained in the first place by even closing the gap to grab. While MK hasn't really been a game to feature a grappler specifically in most entries, grappling variants of characters like Nightwolf and Terminator are very popular in MK11, and they managed to hold their own in an extremely high power level game, which makes me wonder if we'll see a returning or new character with this playstyle in MK1, and what they'll gain from the Kameo system. From a competitive standpoint, perhaps the most confusing element of Kameos as a system from the outside looking in is the summon. The return seems awfully low for the investment, and of the characters we've seen, there's no available character pairing where ending a combo or letting this land as a stray hit seems to wind up leaving you notably positive against your opponent. Using half your Kameo meter and not being able to control your character during these attacks seems like very high risk and investment for what looks to be around 8% reward on average. While these seem strong in very specific situations, the risk involved in using these in neutral means it might take more cameos being announced or more experimentation with the game in time to see this system really bloom, although NRS are no stranger to competitively useless universal options like MK9's X-Rays. Speaking of competitive balance, probably the most notable discrepancy we don't have answered about this system is the fact we can't really tell yet how often you should actually be doing assists, and how often you can either. While we do see Kano show up twice in a single combo in the trailer, we haven't really seen actual players put much use to this system, and unfortunately the characters and kind of assists that are open most to this kind of combo, like Kung Lao, were fully restricted and not available to players who got the chance to try the game out themselves. So how often players are going to even be able to dump their whole assist meter into combos, and how often they decide to do that once the game's beginning to form a meta, is kind of up in the air for now, and it's something we'll have to see closer to release. But it does seem these are encouraged to basically come out once per interaction, so at least one per combo is quite likely. It recharges fast enough that even if your opponent guesses correctly on defense and blocks your first mix-up after you've done a combo, even if you have to use your assist a second time to make that safe, a third assist will shortly come off cooldown mere seconds later. It'll be interesting to see the combo routes that players come up with to accommodate this idea that maybe your assist will have come off cooldown during your combo, but maybe it won't. Another system to see great deals of change to viability are fatal blows. Crushing blows have been completely removed, and while the majority of fatal blows attributes remain the same, it now has a super flash, and the minigame seemingly has been removed. For those of you who don't know, correctly timed button presses could defend against damage or deal more damage in MK11. But in this game, it's a little easier to deal with them in neutral, and in most gameplay we've seen, it wasn't really seeing much use as a result, since the opponent was just aching to punish these fatal blows after blocking them during their super freeze, meaning it likely won't be anywhere near as spammable or as overwhelming as it could be on many characters in MK11, giving characters like Aaron Black a full screen, armoured, 30% fatal blow that could be used on reaction to literally any jump anywhere on screen. It was a common complaint that not only would you see fatal blows too often, but you'd see the same one every single round you played every day for years, based on whatever character you made. And while this complaint isn't fully alleviated, given most people will still stick with one character and one assist as a favourite pairing, you will now see at least some degree of variance, since your Kameo character takes over for part of the fatal blow, and not just your main character. So overall, there's a lot of improvement to this system, and hopefully this means less fatigue from seeing fatal blows so often that they retain their cool factor for much longer in the game's lifespan. Another factor in fatal blows being dissuaded is the new updates to the combo breaker system. You can now do combo breaker on a fatal blow or any combo for complete investment of all 3 bars of meter, which honestly seems kind of fair for the game Mortal Kombat is. Well, it's kind of reasonable for Mortal Kombat to be around a 4 or 5 touch game, and it's not exactly clear how fast you're going to build up super meter in this game, though it appears you mostly gain meter for winning interactions, like blocking your opponent correctly or attacking them. Combo Breaker was also fairly costly in MK11, but probably not costly enough. These new changes mean you're going to have to save your meter and not spend it offensively if you want to have this resource to spend later in rounds, which is going to lead to some tense decision making and make the game overall a lot more interesting to both watch and play. Much like in MK11, blocking a fatal blow wastes the attack entirely and puts it on cooldown for what is around 7 seconds, which is pretty good, and I'm glad we'll be seeing them mostly at extremely impactful times and not every single round, every single game. Similarly, I think this is great news with new Kameo fatalities as well. While there's only one Kameo fatality per Kameo character, it still shakes things up a great deal and allows for variety in what you're seeing after every match, even when you only play a specific character pairing and nothing else. So lastly, that just leaves us to go over the new defensive options in the game. Again, this was something that MK11 faced a lot of criticism for. MK11's wake up system was famously varied and very bloated. While this was an attempt to prevent vortexes, which were previously somewhat common in NRS games, by far this system overly veered in the defender's direction. You could backward roll away from the attacker, invincibly roll through them, stand up normally, stand up after a delay, or get up with an attack or a launcher. While this old system did cost meter, that wasn't much of a concern given just how quickly this could turn a losing situation into a winning one, and how fast meter passively regenerates in MK11. Seemingly, this has been fully removed for a much more skill-based call-out function on defense, where there are 2 new wake-up options. Kameo Getup, where your Kameo attacks over you while you wake up and you're invincible, or a Getup attack, where you have armor for waking up and you absorb a blow. Or you can just do a simple, classic delayed wake up. It's a far more robust and simple system that's far less likely to be open to abuse and anywhere near as tilt-inducing as MK11 roll-through Oki could be. Another new call-out option we have is the air parry, where basically, if you're holding block and you flick up and time it while being hit with an overhead, you knock the opponent right out of the air for a combo in return, which is a direct response to how overly powerful and potent air-to-ground combat has been in past MK games. I would actually say it's very surprising and impressive just how many of this game's new systems are direct responses to criticism, rather than on-the-spot innovations and attempts to appeal to casual gamers, which is very interesting, because already this Kameo system, while extremely stylish, has attracted a lot of vitriol from the more general audience of Mortal Kombat. which I'd like to try and do some work here to alleviate, because I promise you, to any player who isn't used to playing with or against assists, it really isn't that bad or that confusing. While tag games do have a reputation for being very flashy and chaotic, that still really doesn't prevent you reacting to or understanding what's happening when you're playing them. And they're very easy to learn, even when you're just starting out at fighting games or if you haven't played them in a while. As I stated in my last video about Kameo fighters, even with all the features of them that I've mentioned in this video taken into account, there's still only two kinds of assist: a neutral assist or a combo extender. And because of that, the realistic use cases as well as their counterplay is all really easy to rein in and include as part of your strategy. Doubly so in a game where there's only one assist and not multiple to account for and worry about. You see, assists are really easy to include in combos and you don't need to worry about what your opponents are doing when they do that. It's not interactive for you when you're being comboed, and during your combos it's very easy to use your assists. You just press the assist button at the same time you're doing some other part of your combo. It's an extremely simple thing for combo extension. While in neutral, assists are either conditional or reactable. A conditional assist would be something like Jax's anti-air grab. It doesn't do anything if you haven't jumped, so you don't need to worry about it. And a reactable assist would be Jax's sonic blade. You see him come in, knock the player out of the way, and then he attacks. Fighting games are really all about using your ability to focus well, and the better you focus, the better you can react to things. And a strong rule of thumb for this is something I put into my very early beginner tutorial series. That being, always look at your opponent, never yourself. You have complete control over the buttons you press, and you know what you're doing. You don't need to react to anything that you do yourself. Meanwhile, your opponent can potentially have 100 plus things on their move list that they could maybe do at any time, but not all 100 of those moves are going to be valid options, given the screen space, viability, etc. If you know what could hit you, you know where they are, and how you're making them respond to the things that you're doing, like if you throw a fireball, that then can severely limit what things you need to react to at any given time. And if you're focused on seeing something, for example Drive Impact in Street Fighter 6, it's much easier to react to when you're focusing on it and looking for it and expecting it, than just reacting to it when it comes out of nowhere. If you just treat assists the same way, knowing when they're valid, what's the position they put you in, and why your opponent would want to do them, responding to them can become easy, and then the steps that you're making ahead of your opponent can then form your own counter strategy, maybe even including your own assists as part of a game plan that you yourself have came up with. Thankfully, MK1 is amping up to be a very consequential release with, hopefully, a lot of impact on the genre, beyond just the reach of NRS games. If you made it this far through the video and you're interested in Mortal Kombat, fighting game news and tutorials, story overviews, or even my reviews on anything and everything, leaving a like and subscribing to the channel really helps. And additionally, if you'd like to further support me, you can do so through my Patreon or YouTube membership via the description box down below, or at patreon.com/TheRumaFGC. Doing so will net you polls for future videos, early access to new content I produce, like my upcoming Parry Characters video which is releasing this week, or even your name in the credits, or a shout out like this lovely individual who is my first Patreon subscriber and supported me throughout the creation of this video. If this is the first time you're being introduced to my content, I mainly make archetype overviews for fighting games, where I cover niche types of characters in depth, or make definitions for words people often say with very airy and undefined concepts behind them, which I'm happy to say I'm now returning to releasing with some degree of frequency after this monster of a video, and returning to full development on my Shoto Archetype Archive video, where I try and wrangle a sharp, defined definition for the granddaddy archetype of the whole genre. And I'm sorry this video took so long. The Lin Kuei trailer dropping while I was mid-development on this video made me have to slot in a lot of new information to an already halfway finished and fully recorded video, and it got pretty messy to say the least. But hopefully this was well worth your wait, and you enjoyed learning about everything in Mortal Kombat 1. Thanks again for making it this far through the video, and you can drop a comment if there's anything you'd like to see me cover. Whether that's tier lists, predictions, or Archetype Archive videos, or maybe even just a skill that you struggle with in fighting games. Your comment has a very high chance of getting a full response and or winding up on the poll for the next Archetype Archive video. Whether you're a Patreon subscriber or otherwise, I still try and get back to each and every comment I receive, with direct, personalised feedback, and I'm more than willing to discuss anything from likelihood of characters returning, story overviews, or mechanical complexity. And until next time, as always, I'm just going to leave you all by saying, stay safe.